Well, hello. Hello again. So, just a reminder, I'm Laura Khoury and this is Allison Olson, and we are both adoptive parents. And Allison is also an adoptee. And we are also both children's book authors, and we both wrote books on adoption. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about Allison's book, which is called Surrounded by Love, an open adoption story. And Allison, I wanted to kind of hear the story a little bit about, we talked in a previous Zoom about how you or why you wrote the book, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about like how and when you decided to write this book.
Great. Yeah, so that is kind of an interesting piece too, because I know that usually when authors go to write a book, you hear about it, and I think we all think that it's fast, but then there's like a long process involved. But really, in my case, for both this book and then another book that's going to come out next year, I wrote both of these stories in the middle of the night. Middle of the night during parental leave from work, when our daughter was, when I was doing the feedings and all of that kind of stuff in the middle of the night. And so she was sleeping peacefully next to me. And this was when I realized, like, she was in the bassinet, and we had a separate room downstairs so that one of us could get some sleep right upstairs, and we would rotate, right? So if it was my turn, like, I just, when you, I don't know if everyone feels this way, but when you want a baby so bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, sometimes you just like, I would just like stare at her in the middle, it's like, I should be sleeping. You're supposed to sleep when the baby sleeps. I couldn't do it. Yeah. I just was like, she's the best thing ever, and then it just made me think of, going back, as we talked about before, that I just didn't feel like the books on the market captured the story I wanted her to hear. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I just kept thinking about, her birth mom, and just all of the love from her and the whole extended family. And that's when I'm like, okay, so I'm sitting there in the dark. I had to change my notes in my phone to be like black background, so I didn't have this bright light to like wake her up. So I wrote the manuscript on the bed next to her while I was watching her sleep.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, so it was sweet. And then, of course, just for any folks that are like, wow, now I'm worried about reading this book, it did go through a professional editor after that point.
Yeah, probably, and went through you about 30 more times.
But yep, exactly. But that's where I put it together. And in fact, it flowed pretty quickly as far as like what I wanted the different scenes and the different pieces to be in it. So the words may have changed and been tweaked throughout. But the overall premise and story stayed the same. And the fact that I wanted it to follow the adoptive parents and all of the love and want that they had for the child beforehand. And then I wanted it to switch over and move to the birth mom and all of her love and want for the child beforehand, to both of them to normalize the decision around adoption. And then, and then to like show them all together and then be excited for the birth, etc. And then to show like a continuation of love moving forward. And so that all of that stuff definitely stayed the same from that first part. Yeah. And then the other book we can always talk about more in the future, but it was actually an idea from a friend of ours. Kelly is the one that had the idea. She said, anytime she wants to teach her daughter about situations that are not her situation, right? She looks to books, right? And so even like, oh, we're going to the dentist for the first time. Let's buy a book about going to the dentist so you can feel comfortable going to the dentist, right? So she's like, there just aren't books out there for any old little kid, let alone that there are some out there to prepare a sibling, not a ton, but definitely there's not a lot out there for what we would call
Adoption.
non-adoptees, what we
Yeah.
would call non-adoptees, and educating
Yeah.
them on adoption. And in fact, I spoke about that on a podcast recently because they were asking me about my thoughts on National Adoption Awareness Month. And I said, because there's a lot of different views and feelings about it, right? From different parts of the triad in the adoption community. And so from my perspective, I think we need to actually focus on the awareness piece. Because I think that if we shift it over to that and actually make what we call non-adoptees, folks that have not been touched by adoption and don't know what adoption is like current day, they don't necessarily know positive adoption language, current positive adoption language, all of that kind of stuff. I think that could be really helpful. So anyway, so then going back to that book that I was talking about, they'll come out next year. I also wrote that there because I just thought, what would I want her little cousins to know? What could I write? And thinking about myself, because as adoptees, we get a lot of questions and weird statements, right? And we could use a whole segment on that in the future. But strange questions and statements, I still get them as an adult. And I would like to take some of that burden off the adoptee, off the young adoptee, right? So if we could educate and have a book that actually has these questions and the answers from an adoptee and show cute little banter between two little children. And that's what I was thinking of, when I was, again, staring at her down in the bassinet thinking, how can I hopefully make things easier for her in the future? Was when I kind of jotted that manuscript down on my phone notes. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I love it. I know when I first adopted my oldest, I was teaching and we had a ton of parents that were teachers at the time. So we had like all these kids that were always after school, like hanging out in the school. And I had gone up there with Sophie and to I don't know, finish lesson plans or something, because I wasn't really supposed to be there. I was on leave, but I had to go. And all the kids came like rushing into the room and they knew that I didn't grow a baby in my belly and I had a baby. And they had zero knowledge about it. And I didn't mind. I remember I just sat them all down and I happened to sit like in the chair that I always sat with the kids, and they all were just like surrounding me and they were just firing questions. And because they're so curious and they
want to learn. And
yes,
so
they do.
And and I know we talked about this before, like it's also part of like diversity curriculum, right? So I think, that's one thing for you and I, like, I think we should be pushing for this, right, in schools so that they have this level of education. And I love the curiosity. I think that's wonderful.
I do too. That's what I always say, because people get all like uncomfortable because they don't want their kid to say something.
Yep.
And for me, especially because I had an infant at the time, so she wasn't hearing any of it. And I could be I could speak openly about it and kind of get my words ready of how I would want her to hear it.
Good practice. Yeah.
A little bit bigger. Yeah. But I'm always open to that. It's always interesting with kids' questions and all that.
Especially with kids.
I know.
So cute. And then it's just the honesty. Yeah. Because I think sometimes with adults, there might be some extra stuff behind it, like nosiness that doesn't need to be there, like I'm just checking out at the grocery store. Why are you asking if my child is adopted? Like, I'm adopted too. Why didn't you ask me that? So anyways, well, thank you, Laura, for asking me about the book. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Bye.
Bye-bye.